Our next guest is a colleague at Cal Arts, Sara Roberts, the director of the Integrated Media Program, and a heroic effort it is. We both know secrets, but that's not the subject here. Sara is an important, gifted installation artist here in Los Angeles, and she has been at Cal Arts since '94 and been working since the late '80s in various interactive installations. Early programming was shown at the San Francisco Arts Commission Gallery, the Long Beach Museum of Art in '89, showing again this year in the Alien Intelligences show in Helsinki. And we have our visitor here from Helsinki who could talk about it. He's waving, so you'll have to pretend as we're streaming you can wave back. She collaborated with artist Lynn Hirschman on two interactive installations, Deep Contact in 1990 and A Room of One's Own, shown internationally in 1992. In 1993, she was a resident at the Gerasi Foundation, and her interactive sculpture, Digital Museum, was commissioned by the Silicon Graphics for the Interactive Gallery at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. And then we have a vast list, and the list of many installations and continuing hard work. And I think it's best to let her explain this rather than me to simply list it. So I'm very pleased to present Sara Roberts.
Is it on? You can hear me? Okay. Oh. Okay. Hi. I know that this lecture series and this place and this program has a profound interest and concern with the immaterial, with the virtual, with data and with information. But today I'm going to focus on the grubby old physical. I'd like us to think about that sort of vast panorama of efflorescences of material that surround us. I'm going to try this. Speaking of efflorescences. This is a thing. Actually, this is not a thing. This is information about a thing that no longer exists. But it was. It was an automaton that was built in the 1740s by Jacques de Vaucanson. An automaton, let me just be academic here, an automaton can be either a person that acts like a machine or a machine that acts like a person. In this case, it's a machine that acts like a duck. This automaton was capable of wiggling its tail and flapping its wings and quacking, and because of a rudimentary digestive system, it could be fed fish and it would excrete. That is, as a sidebar, the first use that its intestinal tract is the first use of rubber in tubing. So your tires have this glorious ancestor. I'm showing you this duck as an example of one side of what I'm going to call the thingscape. You'll have to bear with me a little bit. This is sort of a guided meditation through the thingscape. The thingscape is primarily composed of, it's sort of an interlocking two-part environment. And it's primarily composed of things that we have made. It's all composed of things. Primarily composed of things that we've made to help us or to make us comfortable. Things that extend our powers, although that's typically what technology is defined as, is a thing that extends our powers. But things like tables, which we don't consider technology, do extend our powers to the extent that they hold up the lamp all day, which we would prefer not to do ourselves. And a chair, which holds us up all day, which we'd prefer not to do ourselves. So this side of the thingscape we're very comfortable with. We have a comfortable relationship with it. It serves us. We are its master, and there's no, we have no worries about its possible spirituality. It's, the things that are part of this part of the thingscape are clearly not animate. Then there's another side of the thingscape, this sort of, you could think of the part that I just described as sort of the negative impression of us. We move through it, and these are all the things that, where we leave off. But the positive side of the thingscape are the things that we make that represent us, are the things that stand in for us, are the things that, most literally, these representations would come in the form of dolls, or statues, or perhaps automata. And that side of the thingscape we have a much more iffy relationship with. We're not as comfortable with it. It's fascinating, but a little spooky. Now the computer, when you consider it in this scheme of things, has had a kind of vacillating presence in both of those sides of the thingscape. The computer started out comfortably enough as an extension of our powers, of calculating powers. It started out replacing a room full of ladies with handheld calculators. And it helped us win the war. It broke codes. It did, certifiably useful things. But soon after the war ended, people started to be interested in making it do things like play chess and making psychological models with it, making psychology, making psychologists, and making psychotics, and making neurotics, and making all these, these programs that use the computer as a sort of representation of us. Not only that, but our sort of notion of what the computer was going to be, of our relationship to the computer, was as another person. That the computer was going to be maybe a smarter older brother. Or, well, think of Hal. Hal was, up until the late 60s, a pretty good, well, longer than that. Hal was sort of what we thought computers were going to be. Kind of creepy. But in the 80s, we refigured the computer from being a person to being a place, which is a lot more comfortable for us. It's a much more, it's useful. It extends our powers. It's hooray, another place, a new frontier. So all that, so the computer, whereas you wouldn't have really wanted Hal in your home, the portal to a new place is pretty welcome. However, there are starting to be, flitting through this space, agents, well, let's not call them automata, but agents and avatars, primarily doing useful things, but some of them are just hanging around. I am sort of going through this whole sort of meditation on the thingscape just in order to sort of orient my own work in this. I'm sort of, I guess perversely, because it's expensive and it's not very fashionable, working the angle of the automaton that is, of the computer as automaton. I'm still pretty interested in how computers can be representations of us in a way. Not of us in particular, but of the things that go on between us. And I will now. This is a piece called Elective Affinities that involves 4 automata. These are not automata on the order of the duck, which was beautifully built and moved mechanically, but these automata are image automata, and they are driven by an emotional engine that is a program that runs on a computer. Each one of the characters has its own computer, and the 4 computers are networked. It's as though there are 4 people. These are life-size. When you walk into this installation, they're up on pedestals and you can move between them, but they are about the size that, well, they are exactly the size that people would be. And if you stand at the back of the room, you can sort of see them looking at each other. It's as though they've been in the car for a long time together and they've run out of things to say. But if you walk up close to any one of them, you can overhear the things that they're saying. And let's see, let's play this tape here. It's the older. I'm going to show you just a quick clip. I guess I should turn this off, huh? Of the sorts of things that they say if you come up when you're close to them. Come on, Edward.
Surprising she has an earring in such a kinky place. What does it mean having an earring way up there in your ear? Nah, kids pierce everything these days. Probably doesn't mean anything, really.
There's something scarily wonderful about all this. Something has to happen, and Edward doesn't know it, but he could lose her to me. Could he? There's a possibility that, God, I can't even think it.
As soon as we're up the driveway, say, Edward, I want to talk to you. Before any niceties, get him in the house. What the hell do you think you're doing? Attilia is a young woman who works for me. I am responsible for her, and I'm not going to let you do this.
As soon as this one's done, I want to see this one.
Well, she's very good to everyone else, but not so good to herself. I have always thought she was like Tante Marie. She would be so shocked to think she's like my fat Tante Marie. Nothing like her physically, but very much the same kind of unhappiness.
Okay, we can stop there. So there are these 4 characters, and they're thinking about each other primarily. 2 of them are married, and the other 2 are close friends. And this isn't actually from a soap opera. It's from Goethe, who wrote a book called Elective Affinities that was about a marriage and about the kind of mores of the period. And this piece is very much about, I mean, it's updated to now and is about marriage and about the mores of our period. And it's also about being able to just watch people and get a sense of what's going on between them, the sort of thickness of relationship. And could you play that? I'll show you a little bit about what it looks like in the installation. Because the 4 are networked, you walk in.
Fido, don't be so fucking tedious. Let's just skip the disapproval. I'll let you.
Charlotte was trying in some half-conscious way to actually talk about what's developing here.
It's wide open. At the flower he just laid on my open palm.
Edward is so much the opposite. It might be that I will finally get close to them both, because now I know both halves. That would be nice.
because they're networked, they send information. Occasionally they'll glance at each other, and each time they glance, they send information to the person they've glanced at about the glance they just received, about themselves and about the mood they're in, and about it affects the state of the emotional engine of the person that they glance at. Here you'll see them looking at each other, and as they look at each other, they sort of resets the area of the database that they think from, and and they start to reevaluate their thoughts about the person who just looked at them. These two look through the rearview mirror. Because this was done, this is from '94, and all of the video is on.
An incredible job. And she turns around and does this.
Is on video
We're
disc.
standing there looking at those deer. Ottilia reached up and took my hand. She didn't think, is this some kind of abusive relationship? Am I violating his personal space?
She'll appreciate the beauty of it.
Okay,
That's
stop
it.
there. So as they look at each other, they kind of reform the kinds of the mood of the person that they're talking to. This is a piece that generally the only person who really gets to know it is the museum guard. Whenever I go in after a while, the museum guard wants to get me alone and ask me lots of questions about that blonde woman. It's different. Oh, thank you. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so so an earlier piece that I did, that this is actually the piece that's showing in Helsinki now as sort of a relic of an earlier time. This is from 1988, and it's a piece that's about the relationship between, well, it's about a very familiar relationship having to do with, whoops, we'll just move on. With the kinds of, it's like a folk song in a way. It's the things that moms and kids say back and forth to each other. And this was the first time that I wrote an emotional engine, and it was a very simple emotional engine that just went in a cycle, going from a good mood, over a period of about 20 minutes to a bad mood and back again. However, the things that you said drove the mood. It drove the mood, either up or down. And actually, I have a short clip of that we could see that is called Margot. Thank you. She has a very heavy computer accent, but bear with her.
Why do we have to go through so much agony over this? Why don't you just practice? It's for your own good. Honey, remember what your teacher told you. Arch your wrists. If you don't care about learning to play, why should I force you?
The little bar in the middle is her current mood state. It gets smaller and darker as she gets into a worse mood.
It's been half an hour. Go ahead, go off and play. Waste this chance to do something worthwhile.
Why can't I take guitar?
Here, let me cut that up for you.
There are about 20 different conversations that are each introduced with a sort of video clip.
Look, here comes a part. You call that finished? You've still got to eat your carrots.
I'm not.
Come on, If you can eat all the everything, you can eat a few carrots. Get your arm back and lighten up. Do you want to lose it? Listen, I know perfectly well who did it. I just want to hear you admit it.
It wasn't me.
Listen to me. Do you think I'm saying this for my health?
It wasn't me.
You are beginning to make me angry.
Okay, stop. I wrote this in 1988, before I was a mother, and everyone told me when I wrote it that just you wait till you're a mother. and in fact, actually, it has haunted me. This piece has, it may appear at the outset to be sort of therapeutic. A lot of people asked me if it could be used as therapy. Really, that's not at all the intention. It's intended actually as a very specific portrait of the relationship that I had with my mother and grandmother, and it is, it has its universal aspects, but it's more, it's more to get I was trying to capture that power dynamic that goes on between mothers and children, and I think that when it is set up, people do get into that, sort of get locked in combat, and it's, I don't know. I think about putting it on the net, but I think that might not be a good idea. Let's see. The next thing I wanted to show you is not as much it's not a portrait in the same sense that these are. It's not about a relationship that's as, it's more about our relationship to things and how that relates to language. There's one called the Digital Museum. This piece is one I probably wouldn't have made, except I was commissioned to do it on the occasion of the opening of the museum, the new museum in San Francisco. And everyone was trying to think about what the digital museum would be.
She's just a young swan, drifting down the aisles of Bob's drugs.
Oh, whoa. Could you stop just a sec?
Oh,
I'm
don't be
gonna
nice.
show slides here in a second. This piece has 4 cases of objects. It looks like a collection of objects. It's actually more of a collection of language, but it's triggered through objects. This is animals, minerals, and vegetables. These are parts of the body. And the last case is sort of more abstract. It's different font styles and the kind of the voices of those particular fonts. And so people move between it and press these objects, and it brings up, as you could hear. Now can we play the tape? It brings up fragments of language that use those objects either, use those objects in the way that they've instantiated themselves in mental life, in conversation. And
this ain't worth dirt.
He's a rock. Dependable, solid, steady, that's my man.
His face is so gorgeous and craggy, eroded by the elements. I wish they would leave that Marlboro man up there forever and forget the goddamn horses.
The guy's got rocks in his head.
3 lumps, please.
Now that you are deeply relaxed, I want you to focus. Focus. Make your mind a single glowing point of white light.
Row, row, row your boat. Row, row, gently down
it's around.
the stream. Barely, 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 barely dream.
You've never seen anything like it. Absolutely cutting edge.
Oh, it's great. You trudge up this incredibly steep slope to the top of the ridge, lope along the ridge for a while, then drop down to the other side into the desert. In our house, we watch 1 hour of TV a day, and it has to be the educational channel.
The voice of Helvetica.
No, I'm sure he didn't think for a minute how much it would cost to have all 50 of us transported there in horse-drawn carriages with liveried footmen. He doesn't think about money, but believe me, when I show him this bill, he's going to faint. All right, go for it!
No, I don't have one. I keep meaning to have one made up, but, have you got a pen? I'll write my phone number. Have you got a piece of paper?
There is rumor and there is fact. I challenge you to prove your statement.
I want you all to understand, this is not a forum for fury and passion.
I think that I shall never see a poem.
Oh, don't call. Let's just go by and surprise him.
Hey, would you like a hand for that?
That was made by hand. How much do you think it's worth?
There's something in the English language, the very words we say, that will forever travel.
So when this is in a gallery, there's a constant kind of cloud of language around it, and people tend to go through all the objects. But it's actually a very, very large database of language, and I continually add to it. The last piece that I'm going to show is another kind of collection. This was a piece I did last summer with a very old friend of mine, and yeah, let me see here if I'm going to call it, for reasons that we gave it a very long and kind of difficult title, but I call it the Pest Club Archive, and I don't have slides. The Pest Club Archive. The woman I did this piece with is named Christine Panushka, and she teaches animation at USC. And she and I grew up together in Salt Lake City, Utah, as non-Mormons, which had a large effect on our social life. If you want to go ahead and hit it, then I can talk with this one. It looks like a very large library cabinet, and it also seems at the outset very low tech, but isn't. It's organized, it's in actually kind of an archive of all the things that we could remember and sort of the pivotal moments of the time that we've known together, arranged around a trip that our two families took to Monument Valley when we were 8 years old. That was the original trip. We actually went back there last spring. There we are. I'm on the right in the red hat. There's her dad eating a sandwich. There we are sitting. There's another of these this is our rental car, which Christine miraculously found exactly the place that we'd taken the picture before. And that's kind of difficult because now Monument Valley is largely closed to the public. You have to hire an Indian guide to go into most of the places that we went. This is about our first day at school. Because all the kids wore keys that told which ward they were from, which Mormon church they belonged to, and we were the only people without them.
Shauna Reed, age 10, emphatically told us that the Mormons would not share their 2-year supply of food with us in the event of nuclear attack. I would feel bad to see you outside dying, but I couldn't let you in.
The Mormons invented freeze drying. That's because we were excluded in one sense. We formed an exclusive club called the Pest Club, which only we were part of, and we developed a great deal of rigmarole that went with it: costumes, a newspaper, that largely had to do with boys. We were very interested for our age. I mean, well, we're very interested. Oh, this is the tree house that her father was an architect, and we had one of the few modernist tree houses in Salt Lake City. Christine saves everything, and she had all of our drawings. We used to do these sort of competitive drawing matches. The person who won got to keep all the other person's drawing, and usually Christine won.
We learned to draw trees and shade from handsome Mr. Macbeth at the art barn.
These are our early influences, starting with our moms. This is some of Christine's animation. There are several of the drawers that have small monitors in them. This was our route to school. We lived in a neighborhood that was fairly high in the mountains, and we'd come down to Oak Ridge Elementary School.
One day in March 1971, rather than walking to Skyline High, we turned a different direction, climbed down on the freeway, and set out hitchhiking for the March on Washington.
We ran away. Turn it down. A lot. It goes from the top of the cabinet it goes from the top to the bottom is chronological. So our early lives are at the top, and as it gets lower, and then it's thematic by strip. So you can open the different drawers together. In fact, a lot of people do open a whole row of drawers and sort of read that
but we're
row.
both from Salt Lake City.
This is a video of the trip that we took back to southern Utah. It's this is both of our families. It was meant to. It started out as with the intention of being a piece that would be locking, that would be self-locking. That would. These are the things that we were jealous about each other. And this is a kind of glass that, when you run current across it, turns white. It was very useful in this piece. These are some little dioramas that Christine made. This was a room that we had in her basement that we got to listen to our records in, and we wrote graffiti all over the walls, and she, embarrassingly enough, saved all that too. And so we reproduced it in. These are, when I was a teenager, after the running away incident, I was sent to boarding school in Colorado. There's actually a drawer for where we get caught in the running away incident, but I did not shoot it for this documentation. But one of the things that we both came to in the process of this, being sort of a double self-portrait, was that we both believe in our work that what we do is make portraits, and that is not something either of us would have thought that the other one would say until we were fairly far into this process. You can stop there. Oh wait, no, go on just a moment, because you'll be able to see that despite the fact that this looks like a simple piece, and that's what I thought it was going to be, it's a nightmare of computers and speakers, cables, and triggers of various sorts. Anyway, we could stop there. That's good. So we both ended up at Cal Arts for a while, and then she left and went to USC. But yeah, we both ended up in Los Angeles. I guess that's it. Are there any questions?
We don't have to ask about the running away incident.
Well, it's a sore subject.
I wanted to ask you about your writing. Do you do a lot of the writing of the dialogues?
Yeah, I do a ton. Actually, in almost all these cases, there's been a big writing component of the piece. And I didn't think I would have time to show all the slides of how I write them, but I usually show the way that they're written with the piece. As I write them in shapes that help me kind of focus on what the relationship of one piece of writing to another piece is. So for the four people in the car, I made these.
Do you have those slides?
I do.
Yeah,
I think
so
yes,
interesting.
Here, I can just pass them. Or we can put them.
Well, there are people.
There are people streaming them.
Oh.
Pass it to them.
Well, very well.
Just pass it to Jason.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, here's one, and here's another. Actually, the project that I'm working on now is a writing project.
In what sense?
In that it's a book, probably. Well, it actually may end up being a website. But I've been really interested in how... That's it. Okay. Those are all. Yeah.
Sarah's doing the book.
It might be a book. I mean, it may not be a book, you know, that comes out as a book.
Is it going to be an artist book?
But it is actually, it's about how people write code and about how artists write code in particular, because code has been, I mean, you know, writing computer code has been such an act of hey, this is the way that I wrote a piece, that I didn't show you. Actually, why don't you go to the next one there? But this was a piece that had different levels of time consciousness, and so each of the different levels was written. The things had to get shorter and more succinct, and then they could get longer and more complicated. Oh, no, that's...
What were you saying about writing code?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, there's no red dot on that. The writing code is, in a sense, it's because so much of life is being represented in code now. So many decisions are being made. So much thought is being put into the style of code and the way that things are represented, re-represented. That it's almost like code is the novel of this period of time. It's a way that it's how our culture is being represented, and I think and it's a novel that nobody reads. You know? And I don't know exactly how to get to it, but I'm interviewing a lot of people and talking to them about the way that they write code, and particularly artists, because artists write code that works against the standardization of code very often, and that they don't have the sort of notion of it being very important that it be concise. You know, science has looked for this unified, concise, problem-solving kind of thing, whereas artists working with code are very often trying to match life, you know, or they're trying to create more modes. Yeah. So I've just been talking to a lot of people. This is how I wrote the. It's very obsessive looking, isn't it? This is elective affinities. This is the four people in the car. I wrote it on these big pieces of paper in a circle. And actually there's a close-up, I think, of one of them there. And so in that piece, the emotional engine was working tension against self-confidence. And so in certain modes they were very tense, and in certain modes they were very self-confident, and I would write out the same thought in 12 different modes. And so that if they got into, this is an algorithm in a sense, but a very big and messy one. And it's each one of the characters has a set of 25 of these thought wheels, I guess I call them, and so each one has 25. There are 25 memories that I sort of selected for each one of the characters, and then I've written them out in different moods, so that as the emotional engine changes, it draws from a different mood each time for the things that they say, and then there's a different kind of it draws from a different pool of visual images, so that the way they look and the way they're thinking kind of match, but they're not together. I mean, they don't come up together. They come from separate pools.
But then there's the whole level about the personal histories of each of them. You take that into account also?
Their personal histories?
Yes.
In a sense, well, see, what I did with that piece was I wanted to deal with the whole book in a sense, which is this long, really weird book. But it wasn't really, it's with the mother-daughter piece or with the mother-child piece, it was simple because those things all take place in real time, and there's no beginning, middle, and an end. But with this piece, there was a whole history that each of the characters had, and they had history with each other. So the device I used was sort of to freeze them in time in this car together, and so that they could fantasize forward, and they could remember backwards, and they could think about each other sort of in the present according to how they were looking at each other. But it was, it's kind of a device. It's like a play, only you couldn't do that with real actors, I guess. It would be hard.
That's what makes it so fascinating, of course, that it has a quality of theatricality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these are kind of like theater, only not quite.
What's particularly great about this, I think, is that you're sort of trying to generate a database version of an internal life in a culture that doesn't seem to take that very seriously. I don't know if you saw the LA Times today, just in a brief point, they said that they've now proven that Freud's unconscious doesn't exist, and therefore the unconscious doesn't exist, and that chemically they have now proven this somehow scientifically, that it's not there. I mean, since they know that penis envy doesn't work, they've proven that too, apparently. And all sorts of other things, and and they found out what you dream, and that what you dream can only be you're blinking when in your sleep. There's this obsession, as you know, in this culture, to make us so transparently on one level. It's really wonderful that you found some sort of ironic stream of consciousness gimmick, to sort of, well, it's a gimmick. It's always a gimmick.
No, it
but
definitely
the gimmick generates real energy. I mean, it's a trope. It's a machine.
Well, it is. I mean, it's my sort of representation of.
It's a machine, like
it's a fictional
set
machine.
of devices. You set up some devices that actually, do something that runs against the grain directly, I think.
Well, the fact that I'm working with computers as being like people runs against the grain at this point.
The system that, in a way, is basically announcing that they can genetically engineer a pill that will not even just replace therapy, but seem to replace your need to even have any subliminal experiences at all.
Well, there's another sort of trend afoot, though, that I was just reading a book by, I'm not going to say his name right, which is shameful because it's Danish and I should know, Tore Nordstranders. It's called The User Illusion, and it's talking about, it's going through a great deal of of science and psychology, but it's coming eventually to a to the notion that the consciousness has shrunk, that our actual consciousness is a very narrow band that we see things through, and that a great deal of what we're functioning on is our unconscious, or is not working within our, the little thing that's kerchunking along. I mean, that's representing the internal monologue, which is, it's really open to question. But
it's fair to say that if you look at Virginia Woolf's, interlocking dialogue as you go from Mrs. Dalloway to someone else, it's in the spirit of some sort of stream of consciousness system.
Yeah. No, it is. It's definitely interested in stream of consciousness. And I'm not sure, I mean, I'm working on another piece that is kind of statues, almost, mundane statues. They're life-size versions of people thinking. And I was going to use stream of consciousness in that, but I'm starting to move away from it, because actually people do, a lot of physical stuff when they're thinking or when they're working. I started working with James Crutchfield and Paul D. Marinas, and I've had them taping themselves working. And you don't need to listen to them to know what they're thinking in a way. Body language and just the kind of, I was really interested in the sort of dance of concentration and lost concentration, and that is very clear in just watching people. And so what I'll do is sort of a sampling thing in the same way that I did these people, probably, is get lots and lots of samples of them working and write an emotional engine that is kind of the dynamic that I've seen in these long tapes that I'm looking at.
These are emotional engines.
That's what I call them.
Yeah.
So Sara, I think these, the emotional engines you have shown us, they are probably, they are not the only ones you have created. So I think you have also created some other emotional engines with other artists. So you haven't told us anything about the work that you did for Lynn Hirschman.
I did with Lynn, yeah.
So now that we are now very confidentially, just between us and everybody on the internet. So why don't you tell us? So what was your real role in so-called Lynn Hirschman's installation, Deep Contact?
Lynn had a character. I mean, in both the pieces that I worked on with her, Lynn had very definite notions of characters. And what I did was make places that you came in contact with those characters in a way. In Deep Contact, there's this great character. And then there's a whole series of other characters. And she knew that she wanted them to, she knew she wanted them all to be there and she wanted you to move through them. But it was sort of my job to figure out the way of physically engaging with these characters in a relationship, in a sort of characteristic relationship. So in Deep Contact, the relationship is very, you're constantly moving between this sort of game and this theoretical kind of, you're constantly coming up against a different mode. And so we just made it sort of it's almost kiosk-like. It was early on in the days of HyperCard.
But the structuring was pretty much your work, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But in A Room of One's Own, it was the character was built. She knew that she wanted you to have this voyeuristic relationship with the character, and I just built the box and made figured out the interaction that would make it voyeuristic in a way that you were sort of you couldn't help but be that. I don't know. It was in both instances in working with her, what I did was sort of the physical instantiation of these characters that she developed.
So she conceptualized and kind of developed them, and then you helped her.
And then I made an interface for them in a way. And also, yeah. I mean, working with Lynn is very open and has very strong ideas at the outset of a project, but then she's very flexible. And so working with her, you can go, in different directions and end up in someplace, completely different than you started out, and it's okay with her, which is kind of nice.
In that last piece that we saw, like the Cabinet of Curiosities, did you structure it so that when you pull any drawer, that there's always like a meaning that's an intentional meaning that's formed, or is it sort of like random between the different drawers?
Well, if you put, actually, yes, there's relationships between the meaning of the drawers vertically, horizontally, and actually even at diagonals. But a lot of them are, well, I don't know. I think people kind of got them. I was going to say a lot of them are very personal, but I think there's one drawer that you can pull out that has a guide to the whole thing, that has our sort of rough drawings of what we were going to put in each, or what we did put in each drawer, and what they sort of, how they related. And
I'm curious if you pull out one drawer and then you pull out another, and then you sort of see a set of relationships. But then if you pull another drawer, does that really change the field of that one, the first drawer or something? That the field of meaning, or
it could. It depends on which drawers you get. I mean, it's not really. When we started the project, what I had wanted to do was make a locking system, so that when you opened one drawer, some drawers would open and some drawers would lock, and so that it forced you into a sort of path, or it didn't force you, but it gave you only so many options. Which would bring up a narrative. It's a tree structure. But I couldn't figure out how to make that a multi-user piece. It would just go completely, it would be meaningless. So we just threw away the locking structure after a little while. It was a nice idea, but I mean, if I could gate people in there one at a time, it would work. There's so many interactive pieces that are like that, you just wish.
In some sense, the structure of the cabinet itself being a sort of like upright structure, it definitely gives certain kinds of clues for reading or opening things. I think most people wouldn't probably start from the ones in the bottom. I think most people who get to the piece probably start by opening the ones on the top. So I mean, it has a certain kind of, probably even in this form, it has some kind of a roots built into the structure.
Yeah, no, we thought about what people would come to. Actually, it's fairly tall, so most people, and that we put a stool by it so people can stand up on it and look down into the upper drawers. But yeah, we knew that the first thing that people would come to would be sort of the, at chest level or maybe lower. And it was in a show, I've forgotten the name of the show. It was about a year ago, and it was at USC, Interactive Frictions. And so it was in a show with a lot of computer pieces, with many, many pieces that were mice and keyboards, and it was in a room actually with a piece of George LaGrady's that you just moved, and that caused things to happen on a screen. It was a really beautiful piece. But this was the one piece that people just threw themselves upon because it was so easy to use in a way. It was very user-friendly, but, and the whole time I was working on it, I was thinking, God, who is going to want to see this stuff? Because it was all really personal, stuff that was filtered through two of us, which made it kind of more interesting than it would be otherwise. But I think what actually appealed to people about it was its systematic nature, was that I had imposed a system on all this stuff that is so hard to impose. I mean, it's like imposing a system on internal thought, It's like, I'm not saying it's real, but it's, it's just the way that I thought of to do it.
There's another literary aspect to this. There's an interest recently in almost personal books, but also about areas and relationship to areas, written in aphorisms of about maybe 2 paragraphs. There have been various books like this. Maybe I don't even think it's influenced by any of the French books from years ago. So in a way, this is a kind of aphorismic process, and they would be numbered, but the order would be kind of elusive. There's a book called Holy Land that came out a few years ago on Westlake, and you'd think it would be incredible. Westlake, that has got to be a boring place, right? But the book has some sort of weird hypnotic effect as you go from one aphorism to the other. There's something about the scale. So I think you've actually found a way into another literary process. There's something very literary about the structure that you're working with that has a lot of complexity. It's very contoured.
Yeah, my mother always says, "Oh, you're just a writer."
Yeah, well, that's easy for her to say. Right?
Right.
then you try it, Mom.
Exactly.
You stand up back there and wire for a couple of months.
But it's like, physical reading, ways of reading, I don't know, with your body, I guess, but kinesthetic reading, I guess.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Can I, Sara, add just?
Yeah.
This is just totally something totally irrelevant, or not, maybe not totally, but do you actually know that what this structure that you're showing us on the screen actually reminds me? I think people have different associations always, but for me this associates with the with those maps that people drew about panoramas in the 19th century, which had all these, showing the kind of the center points. It's like from a bird's eye point of view, so the panoramic structures. It's a panorama of language, and in that sense, I think the center point where all these lines meet in those panoramas. So this is the point of the observer, looking outwards. Now what you are looking are these different segments of language being joined all together, and actually those maps which had exactly the similar kind of structure even had language. So the explanations for all the scenes you were supposed to see. So it's kind of interesting that the structure you came up with, it's pretty close to the idea of the sort of like mapping of this panoramic experience.
Yeah, that is interesting, because it's sort of like an emotional
I have some examples
panorama.
here which I could show you actually in my
Yeah,
office.
I'd like to see them. Yeah, it's when I have put them up, there was one. They're big, so if I have the whole, well, they're about this big, each of them, and so when you put them all together, it's about 8 by 8 feet. And when I've put them up all, like at the Arts Center, they had this really great spot where I could put them all up together, and there was a big window in front of them, and people kept asking me, "Are those Chinese?" Because I think they had some, I don't know, yeah, like systematic in the same way that the I Ching is systematic in the same way. We're just, I don't know, nuts for systems, And so the
It looks a little like one of those memory theaters, that
Yeah.
famous Yeats
Yeah.
thing. There's some sort of Gnostic, Christian, Kabbalistic thing. If you read it a certain way, then something happens, and you can meet God the other way, or meet the archangels this way.
Yeah, we could write a program for this.
Yeah, sure.
It's an algorithm.
That's it, yeah.
There's a great book that just came
Algorithm
out.
to God.
That's called The Advent of the Algorithm that I'm in the middle of. That is really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Comes out of that period, I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
You never showed this. I never seen this.
We're hard to see. I'd like to sell them.
There's this guy in Germany, his name is Willem Sherman. I mean,